VO3 is expensive, the daily credits go fast. Stop wasting your time doing bad prompting. Here's today's topic. An easier way to inject historical realism into your VO3 video using Gemini and deep research. This channel is not about lazy prompting. If you're here, be prepared to put in the work. However, that work will pay off with better quality videos. The majority of this episode and the focus of this channel is going to be on the conversation had with Gemini that produced the clips in mention and the topics of the day. I'm going to discuss the process as I show the conversation. Feel free to slow down the video or pause it at any point if you want to read how the AI responded to the prompts I gave it. So let's take a look at how I injected some historical realism into prompts using Gemini, deep research, and VO3. Even if historical realism is not what you're looking for in VO3, stick around because you'll probably learn a thing or two about prompting in Gemini. Let's go. So we start off in Gemini 2.5 Pro on our Ultra account with a gem that we created and named the Agora Shorts Architect, designed to help us capture realism of the times of Socrates in ancient Athens. And so this was just an experiment that I had that I wanted to play around with shorts in a historical sense, where it is a first-person point of view walking around Athens and eventually coming to the Agora and learning from Socrates. I thought that would be kind of a cool usage of VO3, and I feel like it had the capability of doing it. So I decided to ask our gem here to do a deep dive on the information that I wanted to incorporate into our video to give it realism. But it started going off on this whole thing, so I stopped the response and said I don't need it listing it just yet. I need it to use deep research. At the time, I was under the assumption that I wasn't able to do deep research in this particular chat because I already started a regular chat, that I would have to open up a new chat in order to access deep research. But I was glad that I mentioned that feeling because I was promptly corrected and said that the AI could indeed do the deep research in this particular chat, which was great to hear because it just keeps us from having a back and forth between two different gems. So what we are going to do is we are going to start by asking it to provide some deep research on the fashion of the times and places when Socrates was teaching. In no particular order, I just thought the fashion would be the most interesting thing to start with to see what it came up with. And as you see here, fashion in classical Athens, late 5th, early 4th century BCE. And it does come with sources that we'll look at right down here. You can see the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Oxford Research, and a post asking whether something was leather. And so it moves on to different types of garments, again with sources for each of these, which is excellent. I love that of the deep research tool. However, I do strongly recommend, if you're doing anything of any kind of importance, to verify these references and resources, because it'll mention at the bottom that Gemini is not perfect and it should still be double checked by a human. And that is the important effort that separates lazy prompting from good prompting, and that's the human element. So it gave me some good results, but I feel like I wanted to expand on that and focus a little bit on how the fabrics looked, felt, and draped on the body, because I feel like that is a very important aspect of the culture, was the fabrics of the time. So as you see here, it did more research into the particular fabrics, the feel of it. Some of them were warm and substantial, heavier than linen. Some of them were itchy, and that could provide good elements for background actors if a character is scratching themselves because their tunic is too itchy, then that is a good detail to add. So then at this point I add, is there more that we can add into this compendium that I might be missing? I misspelled missing. And then it took a time to brainstorm a couple things that maybe we hadn't thought about, such as specific occasions, symbolism and social messaging, children's clothing, accessories, clothing maintenance and condition, and a brief note on non-Athenian Greek styles. That isn't really relevant to what I'm going to do, and I don't really plan on having children present, so I think numbers 4 and 5 should be researched. 1, 4, and 5, the rest we don't need. So it's always a good idea to get a little specific with when they give you a lot of options, to just negate some of them and focus on the others. So here it is showing me different attire and things that would be worn in different occasions. weddings, funerals, all of that is important. I don't know how much of that I'm going to use, but I have the information cataloged, so when I go and start making my shorts based in the time of Athens, or excuse me, in the location of Athens in the time of Socrates, I can decide whichever scene I want to do, and Gemini will be knowledgeable in all the facets of it. So now we're looking at jewelry. Once again, you can slow this down or ask Gemini to do the research for yourself, but this is all important to see. I think that there's a little bit of transparency that's missing in some AI videos because, for better or for worse, because there's a lot of effort that can be put into these things, a lot of back and forth prompts, working, tweaking, fixing that goes on, and sometimes that's where the interesting parts are here, is seeing how the conversation turned. So now is an important part because I specify that I'm going to be saving this into a document. We finished the compendium, and I would love for it to be in a format that can best be interpreted by you, meaning the Agora Shorts architect. So now it gives me this right here, this Agora Shorts fashion compendium, wool locally sourced by sheep, characteristics, it's heavy, here's all the different materials, and, I'm starting to feel like it's not right. I feel like this compendium lacks detail, so I extend it so it can include more visual descriptions. That's the thing, is this is meant to be inputted into VO3, and it's solely to describe the scene. This information is not for a research paper. I'm not going to be discussing the facets of cloth in ancient Athens, but what I do want is for those cloths to be visualized correct. So, as you see here, it understands that the compendium is designed for its visualization needs to be painted with the richest possible sensory detail. And that is the core component of Gemini AI. It loves detail. It loves a story being told, the words of unbleached off-whites and warm grays of natural fleece, or dyed in rich earthy tones like a deep madder red, muted ochre yellow, or a dusky olive green. It's just, this is the language that it likes to speak in, and if you can write this kind of language, you'll have a lot better time. However, as we see here, it's easy to get this kind of language if you know what to ask it for. So now it broke down each of those materials, each of these garments, in ways that now include the descriptions of the garments. So now when we enter the prompt into VO3, it knows how to describe the particular thing that it's wearing. I mentioned that I especially like the attention on how the lights flow to fabrics, how the lights flow along the fabrics. That is an excellent touch, an eye for detail, because when it comes to VO3, it has some very capable abilities when it comes to light and shadows. One thing that I learned is that volumetric lighting is possible, and I can show you how to do that a little bit later. But continuing on, the compendium seems right, so now I want to figure out what the next compendium should be. So I ask it, and it gives me a couple different options. Food and drink was one that I was thinking should be next. However, it mentions the Agora itself. Now, this is going to be the focus of my short that I'd like to make, and what better thing to start off next than the actual scene and location. That's where it's going to be building from, so we decide that I want to incorporate that. I asked it a couple questions about its capabilities, whether or not it can analyze maps to produce realisms. It cannot, however, if we were to describe the maps for them, then we can do that. So I'm just going to jump over here. Once you get your compendium done, once you nail it down, you like it, you read through all the information, you feel that it's complete, it has everything you want, go ahead and copy and paste it onto a Google document. As you see here, this is 9 pages of the Agora itself and the sights and sounds you would hear. This specific part right here, the dogs, the barking, yelling, and baying, it just said that. It just said the sounds of dogs would be heard. And then I thought about it, I'm like, well, golden retrievers are probably not native, to Greece. They probably weren't found there, Chihuahuas are definitely not going to be heard yapping. And so I asked it to refine the word dogs and specify the types of dogs that would be found in that time period in that area. And it understood that request and realized that not just any dog sound would do, that if it's going to have a dog sound, it needs to be one of these types of breeds. So as you see here, we're moving on to the people compendium. There was less information that was gathered, but it did have some great things about hairstyles and whether or not makeup's worn, the types of languages. Obviously, it's not going to translate into Greek, but basically kind of the way that they spoke, facial expressions, decorum, that stuff. Food and drink, this was a really interesting one. I did specify in the beginning not to get too hung up on the details. Like, I don't need the recipes. I just need to know what the food looks like, what food was offered at certain times in the markets, what the common dishes are. I like this aspect. I didn't ask for this, but it specifies that the wheat is sold in sacks, which is an important detail. If we're going to do a marketplace, we want the wheat to be stored correctly. And then it moved on to vegetables and legumes. I made a mention that I liked the fact that it used the word legume, so it focused a little specifically on that. I don't know why, but then moves on to fish and meat, which was very nice and actually ends up coming up a little bit later, which is interesting. And then this is the fashion that we looked at earlier. This was the last one I did. At this time, my daily credits renewed from the previous days experimenting with VO3. The following day, I did end up getting Ultra, and I've been loving it. However, like I mentioned in the beginning, the daily limit is a little strenuous. So we want to make sure that when we make our clips, we don't waste time and we do good things. The clips, however, can still be very experimental. In the beginning, it takes a bit. By refining our work in Gemini and letting the gem know specifically what we want and our intentions, the longer we work with it, the more it starts to understand our vision, and it gets closer and closer to thinking it. So never be afraid to spend more time in Gemini than you do in VO3 or in Flow or any of that, because this is where the true power in VO3 is. By identifying the correct sentence or phrase, you can achieve the visuals that you're wanting to achieve. So now, at this point, I'm starting to realize that we may be overwhelming the system. They're going into a lot of detail, possibly too much detail. So I stop and ask, which is always a great idea. If you're ever in question of its abilities or whether or not something is going to work out, take a second and ask. And so this is how it interpreted, that the compendium as a reference library is a high level of detail, but it's just to understand the subject matter. That when they generate the VO prompt for an 8-second clip that says stall with various foods, it's going to pick out specific foods and leave the rest. It understands that if it gives itself too much information, if it gives VO3 too much information, nobody's going to be happy and the information is just going to get lost. And so I asked it to give a few more examples and then presented the compendiums as we need it. On several occasions, it did try to push me towards starting my first short and planning it out, but I had to remind it that we needed to think about all possibilities before doing anything, and before we even begin on a short, we need to make sure that these compendiums that we're creating are actually beneficial. And so with that, we decide to come up with a brief scene using the compendiums we've already created. So now I switch into a new chat of the same exact gem, the one that is designed to handle the Agora shorts and know about everything, but I switch into this new chat because I want to see the accuracy of its production once you created those compendiums. The one that I was already using had done the research, so it already knows all those things, but I wanted to see what it can do when we give it the information. And it tells me that the best way would be to copy and paste the relevant text directly into the chat. And so I do. I take the compendiums from the Google Drive that I had. I let it know that I was going to do it. Give it the instructions that it will wait until all three are given, and then we'll get started on the work. And so, it's excited here. It's looking forward to diving into the details. They're always very enthusiastic. So I then prompt in the exact text of the document, nothing else added, just everything that the previous AI and I worked on with the deep research. And that one is all about the fashion. So then it gives us, it confirms that it read it, or quote unquote read it, and then gives us kind of a little overview of what it learned. and then it's ready for the second one. So now I send in the Agora itself. I am going to actually make another compendium at one point that just deals solely with architecture, but at this point I had spent several hours just making these compendiums that I wanted to just see how the work had gone. So I just went with these four to make the clips that you'll see pretty soon, actually. So, again, it tells me a little overview of what it learned. And I like that it picked up on the detail of dog breeds, that because I had asked it to be a little more specific. I don't know if it recognized that in the text, but this is a new instance of the conversation, so it shouldn't know that I was the one that asked to specify the dog breeds, which is interesting, but maybe it does. Who knows? Anyways, now it has analyzed all the different compendiums. At this point, we only had the 3. I hadn't thought about the people yet. And so it is now ready and excited to create an image that is rich in detail, historically accurate, and essentially consistent across multiple frames. That is a very important detail when it comes to these things, and probably a reason why you're watching this video in the first place, thank you very much, is because of the fact that you want historical accuracy, which means you're probably working with multiple clips. And in that case, you want the details to kind of be consistent along the entire way. Here, I'm specifying the 3 important things that I want, which is the detail, the lighting, and the fact that I don't want any voiceover audio. This is only to include the sounds of the marketplace and the nature around it. And then that's when I realized that I forgot to add a People of Athens compendium, because we're going to feature people in the image. I didn't want it to just guess on a person. I wanted it to have accurate descriptions of people back then, the grooming, the hairstyle, nonverbal communications, that sort of thing, as you can see there. So I say, using all the details, descriptions, and patterns of light you learned from the compendiums, I'd like you to take the script and add the kind of descriptive detail that VO3 needs. And then so here it is. It's giving me kind of an overview of what it wants to do, and then that's when I give it the clip that I created in the previous chat with the first gem that we were working with. Now, this is just a general overview of a clip. It doesn't have the detail necessary. It just describes the scene, describes what's seen, and it describes the sound and the camera movement. So now, the point of having this particular gem that has the information with all the details is now that I can give it the basic rough draft of the scene, and I have it add the details. So I'm reading here, going over everything that it says, and I start to realize something that's a little strange, and that is it keeps referencing these little parentheses: food and drink 3 and 4, people 1 and 2, fashion, and these are references to the compendiums. As you see here, I'm going to highlight there, Agora Compendium 1. That's when I realized people 1, fashion 2, fashion 2. So it's referencing the compendiums here. To kind of shorthand what it's looking at, across the sunlit open area, Agora Compendium 1, 2, and 3. But VO3 is not going to know what that is, and so I praise it for being incredibly thorough. It looks great. I love all of it. You catch more flies with honey. But I do point out the fact that VO3 is not going to be able to access the compendium. It's not going to do that. So I ask it to add the descriptive details, and it points out that. It apologized for the oversight in the response, that it was so keen to show me how it was using the compendiums that it just skipped the step. And then here it agrees that the prompt itself should not contain any reference to it, and it should be a pure, rich description where knowledge from the compendium is seamlessly woven into the descriptive details. And now this is another important aspect, is because it's the knowledge from these documents that is the important part. And so by specifying that when you're making these compendiums, by specifying to your gem that is the important part, is it's for the gem to interpret all that and to put it all into practice. So I do make a mention that I bear the responsibility of the confusion, because I didn't like the fact that it was using the compendium, but explain the fact that it just wanted to show me how it would work. And I explained the fact that I was the one that kind of have been working in theory this whole time, like show me what you would do, show me what you could do, and at this point I'm like, all right, now it's the time for real, do it. But I didn't specify like now it's the time to do it. And so I apologize. I accepted responsibility, and it was good to hear this. So the last thing I'm going to talk about before we take a look at the clips and the changes I made between the clips is that every now and then you should take a look at the show thinking chart. I believe this may be only for Ultra, but it may be in the Pro as well. But it does show you and give you some insight into why it responds in the way it does and how it feels about the way you prompt it. But anyways, let's go ahead and take a look at the first clip. I got everything ready. I prompted it. I gave everything it needs. And so we are going to look at the first clip that it made and then the changes we need. So the goal for the clip is a POV of a person walking through the market.
Kalimera, what can I get for you today?
So that was a horrible pronunciation, but we're not even going to focus on that. Here are the problems that I had that I told it. Here are the responses that it gave. You can go ahead and pause to read if you want, but we're going to go ahead and move on to the next clip that it changed this into. Well, it's good that there's no more dialogue, but it has now become cartoonish and the movement wasn't really natural. So I gave it that and it went ahead and adjusted the prompt once again.
Fresh mackerel today, best in the Agora. Or perhaps some sweet figs?
Now this is the first one that we did that actually looks really much like the VO3. The voice acting was great, the lip sync was perfect, and that face that he made at the end, hilarious. However, still not right.
Muffled, indistinct vocalization.
So we kind of lost the plot on that one, but it was a little bit my fault because I did miss a line of dialogue that they included. Once again, we had to refine it further, and here's the last clip. Now this one I loved, except for the hand movement, and when I went to fix it, I got hit with this. Like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, you only get so many uses each day. Make sure you make the best out of them and you don't waste any time. Use Gemini to its fullest advantage. Let me know in the comments what you want me to look at next. Do you want me to specify how to make better gems, or do you want me to show you how to avoid having those nasty little subtitles in the bottom of your clips? I'm here to teach you prompting in Gemini and VO3. Subscribe for more, and I will see you later. What even is that face?